Hi, my name's Dave Adams, and you are watching The Core Mechanic, and today we are doing number 26 on Mike Selinker's list of 100 games you absolutely, positively must know how to play. Can't Stop. Can't Stop was designed by the indomitable Sid Sackson and published in 1980 by Parker Brothers. It plays between 2 to 4 people in about, well, 3 to 45 minutes. The 3 to 45 minute time reference has nothing to do with complexity or the number of players in the game, not so much the numbers of players in the game, but more to do with the sheer level of luck involved in the game. Now, I am going to talk about some of the luck elements involved in this game, which come down to not being so much luck about managing your probability of making rolls and movements. However, it's still worth mentioning that this game is essentially a roll and move. Fundamentally, at its core, it's a roll and move game. You roll the dice, you move, and it's a race game, so it's the first person to complete 3 columns. The board is an octagonal shape with 8 sides. It's designed so that the extremities of the sides, the outer pieces, move a shorter amount of distance as opposed to the inner pieces, which move further distance. This is where I was trying to compare the luck versus the probability element of the game. You're going to roll 4 dice and pair the dice together, giving you 2 number totals. So the first number total is where you can place 1 token, the other number total is where you can place another token. Should you not be able to place a token, you take whatever numbers available. If you can't place a token using either of the numbers available or any of the numbers available, then your turn is over. You go until you either bust or you decide to stop, at which point you bank your progress by placing down your coloured markers onto the board. When it's your turn again, you start to roll. If you get onto the same column as a column that you've already been on, then you start from where your marker is rather than starting from the beginning again. The idea is to get to the other side of the board and claim that column. Once that column is claimed, all other pieces are removed from that column, and that column is yours and no one else can go on it. It's now essentially removed from the board. First person to 3 columns in a good race-like fashion is the winner. Now, the way the board's designed is where I come in with the whole trying to balance your probability versus your pushing your luck element, that whole dice rolling mechanic. Because being dice rolling, it is essentially luck-based. You could say that there's no skill in this game, but that would be to misrepresent the game entirely. There is skill in this game, and the skill is sometimes knowing what your probability is, sometimes knowing how to manage your dice, which columns to choose, which columns to go for, how to spread out your pieces. And you might say, well, that's entirely dependent on the roll of the dice, and it is, but you have choices, and those early choices will matter towards the end of the game. If you take the middle column, you're taking the high probability numbers, such as 7, 6, and 8. Those numbers tend to come up more regularly when you roll 2 dice together. The 3 and the 12 show up the least probable numbers to show up, so there's only a few spots to go on them. And in good true fashion of any dice rolling, the probability stays true. And if you do manage to get 2 in a row, well, then you consider yourself very lucky and you bank that as soon as you can. So there is strategy and technique in what is essentially a roll and move game. And people talk about roll and move as being like the most boring, wasted times playing games ever. You talk about Monopoly or Snakes and Ladders or Trouble or Ludo, and roll and move just has this disdain to it. People don't want to do roll and move anymore, but in reality, this is, I think, one of the ways to do roll and move. It gives you agency within the game. It's not just roll and watch what happens. It's roll, use the dice as best you can to get the best possible outcome. Take your chances with whatever choice you make. Make the safe choice, go with the center columns. You know you've got a long way to go and you're counting on those numbers coming up regularly. Take the riskier option of going out to the side if you've got that option, and do what you can, hope for the best. And yeah, that is luck, that is the chance of it. But at the same time, if you play conservatively the whole time, you might get through. You might get beaten by someone who plays outlandishly and just puts it all on the line. But more often than not, if you play the probability, you're going to be playing a strong, heavily competitive game. Now, with tongue firmly planted into cheek, Mike Selinker said that if you play this game with a calm and clear head and make careful decisions, you will lose this game almost every time. And that's, in a sense, one of the beauty of playing this game. It's not that it's just a roller move. It's a race with agency. So you're making the best possible chances, trying to give yourself the greatest probability to move forward. And there is that tension that builds. There's that pressure that mounts, that you see someone claim a column and suddenly you feel like you're out of it. You could feel in control and it can all switch around really quickly. That pressure really does get there. And so, do you risk it? Do you roll again? Oh, there are hard choices to make sometimes, and games can just go, you can just completely lose control on a game simply by feeling that pressure, letting that pressure get to you and force you into making dumb, unnecessary risks. Or at times seeing those risks there and knowing that that's your only chance to beat the other person and going for it and seeing what happens. Of course, all this is brought through the game design itself. This game is essentially a Jeopardy stochastic style game. What I mean by that is Jeopardy, where you risk losing all of the gains that you've made so far. In that sense, what it means is that each turn you start with a particular state on the board and you do an action, in this case rolling dice, to try and make progress in the game. That progress is dependent on you being able to bank that progress. So if you don't bank it, it's still at risk. It's always at risk of being lost should something go wrong. The longer you go, usually that risk becomes greater and the pressure becomes greater because you could still make it and keep going forward, or you might lose it all and have to restart again. There are two types of Jeopardy style games. That's the race or the approach style Jeopardy games. And the race style Jeopardy game is where you race towards a particular goal or number or try to exceed a particular number. In this case, Can't Stop is the first to claim 3 columns, but games like Greed or Pass the Pigs require you to get to or exceed a certain point value. Approach games require you to get to a particular goal without going over, and traditionally the game that most people know in this sort of category is blackjack, or sometimes known as 21. Stochastic games are games that start with a particular state on the board, and that state progresses through the actions that you choose. As I said earlier, in this case, it's rolling dice. And that state becomes dynamic then, and then with each passing turn, the game state changes, and each game state finds progress based on the chosen actions during that turn. In this case, if you choose to go with the 7, you choose a particular state on the board, and you're working towards that high probability of getting those numbers, but having to do the extra work to get there, which can slow your progress down. But you can go with the riskier numbers and have a fair chance of getting through the game somewhat at a moderate pace or a really risky pace. Ultimately, the game state is constantly changing and then pausing, and every time you comes around to your turn, you're progressing based off of the previous actions, based off of the current game state, and your actions become dependent on whatever the game state is by the time it comes around to you. Now that seems a little bit confusing, but understand that this whole concept of stochastic games has huge implications for robotics, electronics, evolutionary biology, and so much more. Of course, all of those fancy words really just equate to what we commonly refer to as push your luck games. And push your luck games just seem so simple on the surface. And as someone who wants to design good games eventually, I would love to be able to put together a good push your luck game, or at least to have a good push your luck element. From simple games like Zombie Dice, where it really is just rolling dice and trying to do that whole element of banking what you can get. It's that greed style game where you're banking brains in this case. But there's so much more to it than just that. I mean, I think one of the key elements of any push your luck game is giving the player agency, something to do, some choice to make. And I think the good choices in a push your luck game is that playing it safe just feels like you're not doing enough to win. Whereas the luck element draws you into the whole, you could run away with this, you could get further, why are you stopping there? And gives you a reason to buy into the gambler's fallacy that, well, I'm on a hot streak, which is a complete myth. The hot streak just does not exist. It's an absolute fallacy. But when you're playing those games and you're in the midst of it and you see yourself doing so well, you think, well, surely I could make the next roll. And when you see it happen, it's like, oh, I am on fire. You're not. You're just rolling dice. But I think, though, that is what draws you in. It's what gets you going. And the fact that you can influence the probability, the fact that you have something to do, really draws it away from those simplistic games of Trouble or Snakes and Ladders, where you're really just watching the game unfold in front of you. There are elements of push your luck that work well in games too. I mean, from King of New York, where it's the Yahtzee style mechanic. Do you go for this particular strategy, or are you going for this strategy? And the fact that you're rolling dice means you're trying to play the odds based on what you can do, based on the board game state, but it's still dependent on the dice. So yes, there's high luck, but there's agency, and I think that's a real important factor in designing any sort of push your luck game. More recently, I would have to say Clank has some really great push your luck elements, and it's not like with the dice, but it is about the card draw. As the cards come out, you're running the risk of a dragon card coming out, which means your clank is going into a bag, and that's getting drawn out slowly, one by one. There's that push your luck. Do you keep going further into the cave? Do you make the mad dash to get out? Be the first to get out, run the risk of killing the others off, maybe even killing them off in a position where they can't win the game. Those sorts of decisions, yes, there's a lot of luck involved, but as a player, you're really influencing the outcome of the game still, and I think that has got to be key to any good push your luck game design. Brief as it is, that's all I want to talk about for Can't Stop, but it is certainly a great push your luck game with lots of really clever elements to it, and it's certainly one I encourage you to go and check out. But look, if you like what we're doing, please hit that like button. If you're new to this community, please hit that subscribe button. And if you want to get regular updates, make sure you please click on the bell next to the subscribe button. We look forward to seeing you next time. And until next time, my name's Dave Adams, and you've been watching The Core Mechanic.